drove to my son's house with a warm casserole in my hands and found strangers loading the last of their furniture into a truck. They had moved 90 miles away and nobody told me. When I called, my daughter-in-law answered from her brand new kitchen and smirked through the phone. "We moved on Saturday, I suppose we forgot to tell you." That smirk cost her everything. Because while she was busy planning her future with my money, I was already planning something she never saw coming. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if no one's told you today, subscribe, because this channel is about women who finally fight back. I have lived in the same house on Clover Ridge Road for 31 years. Paul and I bought it the summer after Ryan was born, when the mortgage felt terrifying and the backyard felt like a promise. We painted every room ourselves. We planted a dogwood tree near the back fence that now stands taller than the roofline. After Paul died of a heart attack 8 years ago, I made a decision that I told no one, not my sister, not my pastor, not even my closest friend, Dorothea. I decided I would not sell the house. I would not shrink my life to fit my grief. I would stay and I would rebuild, and I would make sure that the family Paul and I had built together did not fall apart just because he was gone. For the first 3 years after Paul died, I kept that promise. I took long walks. I returned to watercolor painting. I had Dorothea and her husband over for dinner every other Sunday. The grief was always there. Grief doesn't disappear. It just learns to share the room, but I was managing it. I was even on my best days something close to peaceful. Then Ryan's marriage started to struggle financially, and everything changed. Ryan married Brooke 7 years ago at a winery outside of Charlottesville. She was 32, ambitious, and stunning in a way that seemed to fill every room she entered. I liked her immediately. She had strong opinions and a quick laugh, and she talked about her plans for the future with the kind of confidence I had always admired in people. She wanted to start a business, home staging, she explained, helping sellers transform their houses before listing. She had the eye for it, no question. She could walk into a room and see exactly what it was missing. Ryan adored her. That was plain enough. He looked at her the way Paul used to look at me, across a crowded room, like she was the still point everything else moved around. I gave them my blessing without hesitation and a check for $5,000 as a wedding gift, which I told them to spend however they wanted. I did not know then that it was the first of many. The financial trouble started quietly, the way most trouble does. A year into their marriage, Ryan called me on a Wednesday evening. He sounded careful, the way he always sounds when he's working up to asking for something he knows he probably shouldn't ask for. "Mom, I don't want you to worry. We just hit a rough patch." "What kind of rough patch?" "Brooke's first clients fell through. The start-up costs were more than we budgeted. We're about 2 months behind on the car insurance. I paid it." Of course I paid it. Ryan was my only child and they were just starting out. And I had the money. And what is money for if not the people you love? That's what I told myself. "Just this once," Ryan said. "We'll get back on our feet," except that once became twice, and twice became a pattern, and the pattern became invisible because it happened slowly enough that I never had to look directly at how large it was growing. Over 4 years, I paid their car insurance not once, but continuously for 22 months. I covered a transmission repair, 2 months of overdue rent, a security deposit when they moved into a larger rental, and more than $40,000 in expenses related to Brooke's business, equipment, marketing materials, a professional website, staging inventory she stored in a rented unit. I paid a medical bill when Brooke had a minor procedure and their insurance lapsed. I transferred money to cover a bounced check so Ryan's credit wouldn't take a hit. I kept a private record in a spiral notebook I stored in the locked drawer of Paul's old desk. Not because I intended to demand repayment, I didn't. Not once, but because I am the daughter of a Depression-era bookkeeper, and writing numbers down is how I make sense of the world. The total, when I finally added the full column, was $96,412. I never told them I was keeping track. I never mentioned the notebook. I just paid what they needed and went back to living my quiet life on Clover Ridge Road, trusting that love properly given would eventually grow into something worth having. I first noticed something had shifted in Brooke about 18 months before the Tuesday that changed everything. It was subtle at first. She stopped saying thank you. Not all at once, that would have been too obvious, too easy to name. It happened gradually, the way a painting fades. You don't notice it on any single day, but one morning you look up and realize the colors aren't what they used to be. She stopped calling me Helen and started calling me nothing at all. She would enter a conversation mid-sentence, skipping the courtesy of an opening, as if we had already been talking and I simply hadn't noticed. When I suggested things, restaurants, repair companies, anything, she would glance at Ryan with an expression I eventually learned to read, as she doesn't understand how things work. The last time I visited their rental, Brooke had redecorated the living room around a staging piece I had paid for a gorgeous mid-century credenza she'd originally said was for a client. It stood in the center of her home now, and she showed it off to me as though she'd found it herself. I said it looked lovely. She said it works well with the room. Doesn't it? She didn't remember. Or she didn't care. I couldn't tell which was worse. After that visit, I sat in my car in their driveway for a long moment before starting the engine. Something had changed in the architecture of how she saw me. I wasn't Helen anymore, her husband's mother, a person with a history and a will and a life. I had become a resource, a function, a reliable deposit that arrived whenever the math stopped working in her favor. I drove home and I didn't say anything about it to anyone. But I thought about it for a long time, alone, the way you think about a bruise you can't quite explain. I am 68 years old and I spent 30 years working as a county deed registrar for Roanoke County. I know what a public record looks like. I know what a legal signature means. I know the difference between what something says on paper and what it means in practice. I know that the most dangerous agreements are the ones people enter into without reading carefully, or without reading at all. I mention this because it matters for what comes next. The Tuesday morning in question was the 14th of March. I had made Ryan's favorite chicken casserole, the one with the sharp cheddar and the crispy breadcrumb top, the one his father used to request on his birthday. I had been planning to stop by all week. They knew I came by occasionally. We had no formal arrangement, but I was their closest family in the area, and I had learned not to call ahead because whenever I did, Brooke always had a reason why the timing wasn't ideal. I turned onto their street at 10 in the morning. Their driveway was empty. The curtains were pulled back in a way that struck me as wrong, not the way Brooke styled her windows, which was always carefully arranged. These were the neutral, blank windows of a house with nothing left inside it. A white cargo van idled at the curb. Two men in matching gray shirts were loading the last flat-packed boxes through the front door. I parked. I sat for a moment. I looked at the rental sign that had been staked into the grass overnight. I could tell from the ground, which hadn't settled around the post yet. I walked to the door. One of the movers looked up. "You know," I said. "I'm the mother." He nodded, went back to work. I stepped inside. The house was empty, not mostly empty completely. Thoroughly, professionally empty. Clean walls where their pictures had been. Vacuum lines still fresh in the carpet. The faint smell of a cleaning product covering the ghost of a life that had been here and was now gone. I called Ryan first. It went to voicemail. I called Brooke. She answered on the second ring, and I could hear, behind her voice, the sounds of a kitchen I did not recognize, the echo of new tile, the hum of an unfamiliar appliance. "Brooke, I'm at the house. There are movers here." Oh, a pause. "Right, yes, we moved on Saturday. I waited. I suppose we forgot to tell you." The smirk was in her voice. "I want to be precise about this because I know how it sounds. How do you hear a smirk? But I have spoken to this woman for 7 years. I know the particular quality of her voice when she is performing surprise, when she is performing innocence, when she is enjoying something she is pretending to treat casually." The smirk was there. It was intentional. She wanted me to feel the smallness of being forgotten on purpose. "Where did you move?" "Outside Charlottesville. It's a beautiful farmhouse. We found it in January. They had known since January. They had planned this for at least 2 months, while I continued paying their bills and driving over with casseroles and asking no questions because I trusted them." "What's the address?" A brief pause. "We'd like to keep it private for now. Helen, I hope you understand. We both need space to settle into our new life, and we'd appreciate it if you'd respect our boundaries." "Brooke, I'd like to speak with Ryan, please. He's busy right now. I can hear him." "He's right there." Silence. Then the distant shuffle of someone being handed a phone and not wanting to take it. Then Ryan's voice, flat and careful. "Hey, Mom, Ryan. You moved 90 miles away and you didn't tell me. I know. I'm sorry. We should have called. Not I should have called you the moment we decided. I should have come to the house and sat with you and told you myself. I should have remembered that you are my mother. Drove 90 miles on winter roads to bring me soup when I had the flu 3 years ago, and you have never, not once treated me like an inconvenience," he said. "We should have called. Are you all right?" I asked. "We're fine, Mom. Things are really good. Brooke's business is expanding, and the new place gives us room to grow." "That's wonderful," I said. "I'm glad you're doing well." I meant it. Even then, standing in that empty house with my casserole going cold in my arms, I meant it. I am his mother. Wanting good things for my children is not something I know how to turn off. "I'll let you get settled," I told him. "You know where to find me." I ended the call. I set the casserole on the kitchen counter. Old habit. A kitchen is still a kitchen, even without furniture, and I walked slowly through every room. I don't know why. Maybe I was looking for something. Maybe I needed to see for myself that there was truly nothing left. I stood in the room that had been Ryan's home office, where I had once sat with him for 2 hours helping him organize receipts for a tax return he had let pile up. The room was clean and empty and perfectly, terribly indifferent. I walked to my car. I put the casserole in the back seat because I had made it from scratch and I was not about to leave a perfectly good casserole in an empty house. And then I drove home. I did not cry until I was inside with the door closed. I stood in my kitchen, my real kitchen, with the blue ceramic canisters Paul and I found at an estate sale in 1994, and the crooked drawer that's never sat right in the window that looks out over the backyard and the dogwood tree, and I allowed myself exactly as long as I needed. Then I washed my face, I made a cup of coffee, I carried it to Paul's desk, and I opened the locked drawer. I sat there reading through 4 years of records. Amounts, dates, descriptions. The insurance payment for March had already cleared. The total at the bottom of the last page sat quietly under my finger like a stone. I did not feel angry. Not yet. I felt something quieter and more serious than anger, the feeling you get when you realize that what you thought was solid ground has been hollow for a long time, and the only reason you didn't fall through is that you hadn't stepped in exactly the wrong place yet. I thought about the smirk. I thought about I suppose we forgot to tell you. I thought about Ryan's voice, not angry, not ashamed, just carefully flat, the voice of someone who had practiced what he was going to say and was relieved that I wasn't making it harder. I thought about Brooke, standing in her new farmhouse kitchen 90 miles away, and I wondered what story she was telling herself about me. Whether she had already decided that my reaction to this, whatever my reaction turned out to be, would confirm whatever narrative she had built. The controlling mother-in-law, the woman who can't let go, the one who had to be left behind. I thought about all of it for a long time. Then I picked up the phone and called my attorney. "Naomi Bennett." "Naomi," I said when she answered, "I need to meet with you as soon as possible. Something has happened and I need to understand exactly where I stand." "Of course. Helen, can you come in Thursday morning?" I was hoping for tomorrow. A brief pause. "Naomi has known me for 11 years. She heard something in my voice. 8:30, she said. "I'll have coffee ready." I thanked her and ended the call. Then I went back to Paul's desk, opened the locked drawer again, and spent the rest of the afternoon building a list. Every payment I could document, every transfer, every bill, every receipt. I had kept more of it than I realized. I am my father's daughter, and throwing away financial records has never felt safe to me. I had bank statements, email confirmations, even a few text messages where Ryan had sent me the exact amount and I had replied, "I'll send it today." By the time I finished, the stack of papers on Paul's desk was 2 inches thick. I sat back and looked at it. $96,412. 4 years, one smirk. I thought, "You have no idea what you just started." The next morning arrived gray and cold. I dressed carefully. I always dress carefully when I am about to have a serious conversation, because I learned long ago that how you carry yourself will changes how people hear you. I put on my navy blazer, the one I wore to every important meeting during my 30 years at the county office. I pulled my silver hair back. I looked in the mirror and I said, quietly to the woman looking back, "You were not wrong to love them. You were not wrong to help. Being generous is not the same as being naive, and you are going to remember that every day for the rest of your life." Then I got in the car and drove to Naomi's office. Naomi Bennett is the kind of attorney who listens with her whole body. She is 62, sharp as a compass point, and she has the particular gift of making you feel both completely heard and slightly afraid of how much she already understands. She sat across from me that morning with her legal pad and her reading glasses, and she did not interrupt me once while I told her everything. When I finished, she looked at the stack of documents I had placed on her desk. "You kept all of this," she said, "every page. Good." She picked up the top sheet and studied it. "Helen, I want you to brace yourself, because what I'm about to tell you is going to be worse than what you already know." I folded my hands in my lap. "Go ahead. I received a call from a colleague of mine last week. Commercial lending. He mentioned a new business loan application that flagged for review specifically because of some unusual collateral documentation." She looked up. "The business is called Hearth and Haven." I kept my face still. "That's Brooke's company. The loan amount is $180,000. She paused. "And the application includes a letter, signed in your name, confirming your awareness of the loan and your willingness to serve as a co-guarantor." The room was very quiet. "I never signed anything like that," I said. "I know you didn't." She set the paper down carefully. "The signature on file appears to be a digitally reproduced copy of your name taken, we believe from an old insurance authorization. It's sophisticated enough to pass an initial review, but it won't survive scrutiny." I understood then why the loan officer had called me the previous morning. The number $180,000 had seemed random when I heard it. Now it had a shape. "What else is in the application?" Naomi hesitated in the way she does when she is about to say something she wishes she didn't have to say. "Brooke's investor packet describes the company's financial backing as supported in part by, and I'm quoting directly here, anticipated family trust assets. There are also projections that appear to rely on the sale of a residential property." She looked at me steadily. "Helen, they listed your home." I sat with that for a moment. My home, the house on Clover Ridge Road, the dogwood tree and the crooked drawer and the blue ceramic canisters from the estate sale. The house Paul and I had built a life inside of, and where I had kept building after he was gone. They had listed my home as an asset they were planning to liquidate. How long has this been in motion, I asked, based on what I've seen? At least 8 months. 8 months. While I was paying their car insurance and their business expenses and their overdue rent, they were building a business plan around my house and my estate and my eventual death. I thought of Brooke's voice. I suppose we forgot to tell you. I thought, no, you didn't forget. Forgetting would have been an accident. This was a decision, Naomi, I said. Tell me everything I need to do, and then let's get started. She walked me through it methodically, the way she does, not rushing, making sure I understood each step before we moved to the next. First, I would revoke every automatic payment connected to Ryan and Brooke's accounts, insurance, phone plan, any recurring transfers. Second, I would remove Ryan's name from my emergency contacts and medical authorization forms at my doctor's office and hospital. Third, and this one took me a moment, I would revoke Ryan's power of attorney, which I had granted him 3 years ago when I had a minor surgical procedure and wanted someone to have authority to act on my behalf if something went wrong. That document in the wrong hands was a liability. Fourth, I would work with Naomi to execute an updated estate plan will. Trust all of it with Ryan and Brooke removed. Fifth, we would notify the lender about the unauthorized signature and the fraudulent investor materials, formally and in writing through Naomi's office. What about Ryan, I asked. What about him? Is he what he did criminal? Naomi was quiet for a moment. He signed documents that described your estate as if it were already his. Whether that rises to the level of criminal fraud is something the DA's office would determine. Not me, but I think you know what question you want to ask. I looked at my hands. What will happen to him if I push this as far as it can go? It could be significant. I sat with that. Give me time to think about it, of course. She leaned forward slightly. Helen, you are not required to protect him from the consequences of his choices, but you're also not required to pursue the maximum possible damage. Both of those are valid paths, I know. I just need to figure out which one I can live with. I looked out the window at the gray morning. I thought about Ryan at 12 years old in Paul's shop, learning to use a level to hang a shelf straight. I thought about the way he used to fall asleep in the car on long drives and wake up embarrassed about it as a teenager, and then forget to be embarrassed and fall asleep anyway. I thought about the morning Paul died when Ryan sat beside me in the hospital waiting room and held my hand and didn't say a single word, because he knew that there were no words and he didn't insult me by inventing them. I thought about what it meant that the same person who held my hand in that waiting room had signed his name to documents that treated my death as a scheduled financial event. I need to protect myself, I said finally, and I need to make sure they can't do this again, to me or anyone else, but I'm not going to destroy him if I don't have to. That's a reasonable position, Naomi said. We can work within those boundaries. Good, I straightened. Then let's start. I spent the next 3 days executing every item on the list Naomi and I had built together. The automatic payments were the easiest. I canceled them online, one by one in the order they appeared in my records. The car insurance, the phone plan, the payment to the storage unit where Brooke kept her staging inventory, the emergency fund transfer that went out on the first of each month without anyone asking. Each cancellation was 3 or 4 clicks. Each one felt like closing a door I had been holding open for years with my own tired arms. Changing the locks was different. I had a locksmith come on a Thursday afternoon. He was a young man, maybe 30, with a neat beard and a tool belt that jingled when he walked. He didn't ask why I was rekeying all 3 doors. He just worked, and I stood in my living room and watched him, and I thought about Ryan's key. Ryan had a key to my house. I had given it to him after Paul died, because the idea of something happening to me and nobody being able to get inside had felt important to address. I had given him the key as a practical measure, a safety precaution, the way you leave a spare with someone you trust. I listened to the locksmith work and I thought, you gave him that key because you trusted him. You trusted him because you are his mother and he is your son, and that should mean something permanent and real. But he has shown you, in writing, over 8 months, that he viewed your home as an asset to be sold. You are not wrong to change the lock. Changing the lock is not a punishment. It is what you do when the people who have access to your house have demonstrated that they do not understand what your house is. When the locksmith left, I stood at my front door and I turned the new key in the lock. The mechanism was clean and smooth, different from the worn familiar resistance of the old one. I locked it, I unlocked it, I locked it again. I stood there for a moment with my hand on the door. Then I went back inside and called Dorothea, and I told her everything. Dorothea Crane has been my closest friend since we were in a Roanoke Garden Club together in 1998. She is a retired school principal, which means she is constitutionally incapable of sugarcoating anything, which is one of the reasons I have always valued her. She listened to the entire story without speaking. When I finished, she said, Helen, I have 2 things to say to you. I'm ready. First, I am furious on your behalf, and I need you to know that. Second, I have been watching Brooke Calloway treat you like a silent ATM for 3 years, and every time I tried to bring it up, you told me I was misreading the situation. So I am going to be very gentle about this next part. Go ahead, you were not misreading the situation. I laughed a short, surprised laugh that I didn't expect. It broke something open in my chest in a way that felt necessary. You're allowed to say that again. I will not, she said firmly. Once is enough. Now tell me what you need. What I needed, I told her, was for someone to know, someone I trusted completely, who understood what had happened and what I was doing about it, so that if things escalated and I had begun to believe they might, there would be someone who had the full picture. I know, Dorothea said. I have always known. Not like this, you didn't, no. But I knew enough to worry. A pause. Are you eating? I'm fine. That is not an answer. I ate the casserole, I said. I brought it home. I've been eating it all week. Good, she said. Keep eating, and Helen, you are doing exactly the right thing. The calls from Ryan started on day 4. The first one came at 8:47 in the morning, before I had finished my coffee. I let it go to voicemail. Mom, hi, it's me. I just saw that the insurance payment didn't go through this month. I'm sure it's just a banking thing. Can you give me a call? Thanks. The second call came that evening. Hey, Mom. Just checking in. Getting a little worried about the payment. It still hasn't cleared. Can you call me back? The third was the following morning. Mom, something's going on with our phone plan too, and the storage unit sent a payment declined notice. Can you call me? I'd rather hear your voice than keep leaving messages. I sat with my coffee and listened to all 3 voicemails. His voice moved through stages, casual confusion, then careful worry, then something beneath the worry that I recognized because I know my son, a low hum of fear about what my silence might mean. I called him on day 5, he answered on the first ring. Mom, thank you for calling. Hi, Ryan. We've been getting there. Seem to be some issues with the accounts. Yes, I said. I canceled them. A beat of silence. You, all of them. Another silence. Longer. When he spoke again, his voice was different, flatter. More careful. Can I ask why? I think you know why. Ryan, is this about the move? Because I understand we should have. It isn't about the move. It's about the loan application. Complete silence. The $180,000 loan that Brooke applied for using my signature. I kept my voice even and clear. The investor packet that describes my estate as anticipated financial backing. The farmhouse purchase agreement that lists my home as property expected to be sold. Nothing. His voice broke slightly. Mom, I need to explain. You can explain. But I need you to understand something first. I have spoken with my attorney. She has already contacted the lender. The documentation has been flagged and is being reviewed. Everything is on record. A pause. I am not calling to argue with you. I'm calling because you are my son and you deserve to hear this directly from me, rather than through a legal notice. I heard him breathing. I didn't know she was going to use your signature, he said. But you knew about the loan. Silence. You knew about the investor packet. More silence. You knew that Brooke was presenting my estate as collateral. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and careful and deeply ashamed, which told me everything I needed to know about whether he understood what had happened. I thought you would. I thought once everything was set up and working, you would be proud of what she built. I thought we could explain it after the fact and you'd see it the way we saw it. I was quiet for a moment. Ryan, I want you to think very carefully about what you just said. You thought that building a business plan around my estate and my eventual death, without my knowledge or consent, and then presenting it to me as a done deal, you thought that was something I would be proud of. When you say it like that, that is what happened. That is precisely what happened. I took a slow breath. We will talk more, but right now I need you to understand that the financial support is over. All of it, and everything that comes next, will depend on whether you are honest with me from this point forward. I ended the call. I sat for a long time after that at Paul's desk with the documents and the notebook and the stack of paper that represented $96,000 of my trust. I thought about something Naomi had said. You are not required to protect him from the consequences of his choices. I thought about something Dorothea had not said, that love is not the same as enabling, and that protecting someone from consequences is sometimes the least loving thing you can do. I thought about Paul and the way he used to say that honesty and kindness were not opposites, that the most unkind thing you could offer a person was a comfortable lie. Then I opened my calendar, my real calendar on my desk, the paper one I have used for 30 years, and I looked at the empty squares of the weeks ahead. I picked up a pen. I wrote, watercolor class Tuesday 10 a.m. I wrote, historical society meeting Thursday 2 p.m. I wrote, dinner with Dorothea and Frank Saturday. I looked at the squares, filling in one by one with a life that belonged entirely to me. Then I closed the calendar and went to make lunch. The watercolor class met every Tuesday morning in the back room of the Roanoke Arts Collective, a space that smelled like turpentine and old wood and the specific kind of quiet that belongs to people who have chosen to be exactly where they are. I had not painted seriously in almost 4 years. The last canvas I'd finished was a view of the backyard in October, the dogwood tree going golden red, the light doing something extraordinary in the late afternoon. Paul had asked me to frame it. I never did. It was still leaning against the wall in the hallway, unframed, gathering the particular kind of dust that accumulates on things you can't bring yourself to deal with. The Tuesday after I canceled every payment connected to Ryan and Brooke's household, I drove to that class with my old kit in the back seat and the casserole dish finally washed and put away, and I sat down at a table between a retired librarian named Constance and a man named Arthur who was 74 and had recently survived a triple bypass and wanted, he told me with complete sincerity, to paint something beautiful before he died. I didn't talk about Ryan. I mixed colors and listened to Constance describe her granddaughter's first soccer game with the kind of detailed, loving attention that only grandmothers can sustain. And I watched Arthur hold his brush with enormous careful concentration, and for 2 hours I was simply a woman painting, in a room full of people who had no idea what my week had looked like. It was the most peaceful 2 hours I'd had in months. I drove home feeling something I hadn't expected, not relief exactly, but a kind of steadiness, like I had remembered briefly what it felt like to be a full person rather than a source of funds. I was still carrying that feeling when I walked through my front door and found 3 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. I called back from the kitchen, still in my coat. Mrs. Whitaker? Yes, this is Daniel Fortner. I'm a loan officer with Piedmont Commercial Lending. I'm following up on a conversation my colleague had with you earlier this week regarding the Hearth and Haven business loan application. I want to make sure we have your correct contact information, because I had a question about the co-guarantor documentation. I set my painting kit down on the counter very slowly. Mr. Fortner, what documentation do you have with my name on it? A pause. The co-guarantor agreement, the letter of intent confirming your awareness of the loan and your agreement to serve as secondary guarantor in the event of default. Fortner, I did not sign any such document. I have never seen any such document. And I would like you to explain to me exactly what my name is attached to before this conversation goes any further. The pause this time was longer. Mrs. Whitaker, I think we need to have a more detailed conversation. Is there a time I can call you back with my supervisor present? Yes, I said. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, and Mr. Fortner, please make sure your legal department is aware of this call. I hung up. I stood in my kitchen in my coat and my painting clothes with cadmium yellow still faintly on my right index finger, and I looked at the phone in my hand and I said out loud to no one, there it is. I had suspected. Naomi had warned me. But there is a difference between suspecting that the floor might be rotten and actually hearing it crack beneath your weight. I stood in that kitchen and I let myself feel the full weight of what I was standing on, and then I took my coat off, hung it by the door, washed the paint off my hands, and called Naomi. They have a co-guarantor document with my signature, I said when she answered. A loan officer called me 20 minutes ago. When can you meet? Tomorrow morning. Can you be at my house at 7? I'll bring the coffee. I sat down at Paul's desk that evening and I opened the notebook again. But this time I wasn't reading numbers. I was reading sequence, the order of events, the timeline, the way things had unfolded. January, when they found the farmhouse, at least 8 months, Naomi had said, since the investor materials were being developed, which meant that while I was cutting checks in the summer, while I was covering Brooke's staging inventory and Ryan's bounced payment in August, they were already building the infrastructure of a business plan that treated my estate as a guaranteed asset. They had not developed bad habits gradually, they had made a plan. I closed the notebook, I went to bed, I lay awake for a while in the dark, listening to the house settle around me the way old houses do, and I thought about something my father used to say, the truth doesn't get easier to face with time, it just gets more expensive to avoid. I had been avoiding a truth about Ryan and Brooke for a long time. Not because I was naive, I've never been naive, not about money, not about people, but because I loved him, and love has a way of making you negotiate with what you see. You notice the warning sign and then you immediately build a case for why it isn't what it looks like. You find the alternative explanation, the charitable reading, the benefit of the doubt. You do this because the alternative, accepting that someone you love has made choices that cannot be explained away, requires a kind of grief that is different from ordinary grief. Ordinary grief is losing something, this grief is revising history, going back through 4 years of memories and understanding that some of what you thought was connection was, on one side calculation. I wasn't ready to feel all of that in a single night. So I let myself feel a portion of it, and then I let sleep take the rest. By 7 the next morning, Naomi was at my kitchen table with a thermos of coffee and a legal pad, and we were working. She had pulled the investor packet documents that the lender's office had flagged for review. She spread them on the table between us. I had seen financial documents for 30 years, but looking at these was different because my name was in them. Not attributed to me. not referenced my name, in a letter, in a formal typeface, above a signature that was a digital reproduction of the one I used on routine insurance authorizations. It was a good copy. That was the thing that unsettled me most. Someone had been careful. Someone had paid attention to exactly how my signature looked and had reproduced it well enough to clear an initial review at a commercial lending institution. Brooke had an eye for detail. I had always known that. I had admired it once. This is the letter, Naomi said, sliding it across to me. And this is the insurance authorization from 3 years ago. I looked at them side by side. The signature was not identical. It never is when it's reproduced rather than original, but it was close. Close enough. What happens now? I asked. I've already drafted a formal notice to Piedmont Commercial Lending disputing the signature and withdrawing any implied authorization. Once that's submitted, the loan is effectively suspended pending investigation. If Brooke wants to pursue the loan, she'll need to reapply with legitimate documentation, which she does not have, because you have now formally revoked any association. And the investor packet misrepresentation to investors is a civil matter and potentially a criminal one, depending on whether any money was actually exchanged based on those representations. She looked at me steadily. Did you know she was presenting this packet to outside investors? Not just the bank, no. There appear to be at least 3 private individuals who received versions of this document. She slid another paper across. One of them has already responded to a query from my colleague. He invested $15,000 in Hearth and Haven last fall, based partly on the language about family trust assets. I stared at the paper. $15,000. A private individual, presumably someone with a retirement account and a reasonable hope for a return on investment, had put $15,000 into Brooke's business because Brooke had told him, in writing, that my estate would support it. She told strangers that my money was coming to her, I said. She told investors that anticipated family trust assets would support the business. Yes, I sat back in my chair. Something moved through me that was not quite anger. Anger is hot, and this was cold, the way deep water is cold. A clear, still, thorough cold, Naomi, I said. I want to know everything. Every document, every investor, every claim she made with my name or my estate attached to it. I want the full picture. That's what I'm building. Good. I looked at my coffee. And Ryan? His signature appears on several of the preliminary documents. The farmhouse purchase agreement in particular. She chose her words carefully. He was not a passive bystander, Helen. I know, I said. I know that. We sat with that for a moment. I'm going to call him today, I said. But first I want to handle the lender. Let's get that notice submitted. The call with the lender's office happened at 8 o'clock exactly. Naomi joined on a conference line. Daniel Fortner was there with his supervisor, a careful woman named Margaret who asked precise questions and wrote down everything and thanked me for my promptness in flagging the issue. I was direct, factual, and entirely unemotional because I have spent 30 years in county government, and I know that emotion in a formal meeting is a cost you pay for no benefit. By 8:45, the dispute was formally on record and the loan was suspended. I thanked them, ended the call, and looked across my kitchen table at Naomi. One down, she said. One down, I agreed. I called Ryan. He answered on the first ring again. He had been waiting for me to call. I could tell the quality of his voice when he said hello had the particular tension of someone who has been sitting with a phone in their hand. I spoke with the lender this morning, I said. The loan is suspended. Silent. Ryan, I need you to tell me something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Did you know about the investor packet? The one with the language about family trust assets? The silence lasted long enough that I had my answer before he spoke. I read the early drafts, and I told Brooke I thought she should talk to you before using that language. Did she? She said it was standard investor terminology. She said it didn't actually commit you to anything, Ryan. I kept my voice even. She took my signature from an insurance document without my knowledge and attached it to a loan application. She told 3 private investors in writing that my estate would support her business. Does that sound like standard investor terminology? No. His voice was low. No, it doesn't. I need you to understand what has happened here. This isn't about the move anymore. This isn't about hurt feelings or communication breakdowns. Your wife committed financial fraud using my identity. And you knew enough about it to be uncomfortable and stayed quiet anyway. I didn't think it would get this far. That is the sentence of a person who knew something was wrong and chose not to stop it. Silence. Ryan, I love you. I will always love you. That is not something that changes. But I need you to understand that love and trust are not the same thing. And right now you have broken my trust in a way that has legal consequences. Not just personal ones. A pause. My attorney has a full picture of what's been done. What happens next depends significantly on what you choose to do. What do you want me to do? I want you to be honest with me. That's the only place we can start from. A long pause. Then quietly, what do you want to know? Everything, and he told me. Not all at once and not without pauses where I had to wait through his discomfort, but he told me the farmhouse had been Brooke's idea renovation project, She'd called it something that could double as a venue for her business. The move had been planned since January, and he had agreed to keep it from me because Brooke had said that telling me would prompt interference. The investor materials had started as something he'd thought was harmless marketing, until he read the version that included my estate and felt the first clear note of wrongness, but by then, Brooke had already sent them out, and he had not known how to walk it back without starting a fight he didn't think he could survive. That last part stopped me. You were afraid of her, I said. He didn't answer right away. It's not that simple, Ryan. Were you afraid to contradict her? A very long pause. I wasn't afraid of her. I was afraid of the version of our life that would exist if I told her she was wrong. She was so certain. She's always so certain, and I don't know when I stopped being someone who pushed back. I heard something in his voice that I had not been expecting. Not just shame, but the particular, exhausted grief of a person who has recognized something about themselves that they can't unfeel. He wasn't just confessing to me. He was saying something out loud that he had been avoiding saying to himself. Okay, I said after a moment. Thank you for telling me that, Mom. We're not finished. There's more to discuss, and it has to involve Naomi. But I want you to know that I heard you. I ended the call and sat for a while with the phone on the desk in front of me. Then Brooke posted online. I found out through my niece, Carol, who texted me a screenshot at 3 p.m. with the message, Aunt Helen, I didn't know if you'd seen this. Are you okay? The post was on Brooke's business social media page, carefully written in the language of a woman who has learned to present grievances as personal growth content. It began with something about transitions and new chapters, and then it pivoted smoothly and deliberately to a paragraph about the emotional labor of maintaining relationships with controlling family members who struggle to support your independence. It described how she and Ryan had felt unable to grow while someone close to them continuously monitored their decisions, made support conditional on compliance. It did not name me. It didn't need to. The comments were full of people offering support and validation. A few relatives had liked it. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in 2 years had left a comment that said, "So sorry you're dealing with this. You deserve people who lift you up." I read the post twice. Then I put my phone down and went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea, and I stood at the window looking out at the backyard while the kettle heated. Here's what I did not do. I did not comment. I did not call Carol and ask her to respond on my behalf. I did not forward the post to Naomi with an emotional message in all capitals. I did not call Ryan and demand that he make Brooke take it down. I understood what the post was. It was a preemptive narrative. Brooke had done the math. My payments had stopped. The loan was in trouble, the situation was shifting, and she had decided to establish her version of events before mine could be established for me. She was building the story she wanted the family to believe, that I was the villain, punishing them for having the audacity to become independent, and that everything falling apart was my interference rather than her fraud. It was smart in the way that dishonest strategies are often smart. It exploited the basic human instinct to believe the person who speaks first and sounds most wounded. But here was what Brooke didn't know, and what I understood with perfect clarity standing at my kitchen window. Paper beats performance every single time. I had documents. I had bank records. I had an attorney who had already submitted formal dispute letters to a commercial lender. I had a notebook with 4 years of transactions, and I had, in my locked drawer, the beginnings of a new estate plan that she had not yet seen. She could tell whatever story she wanted on social media. The paper told a different one. I finished my tea and called Naomi. She posted something online, I said, framing herself as the victim. I saw it. What do I do? Nothing, Naomi said. You do nothing. You don't respond. You don't have anyone else respond. You don't acknowledge it publicly in any way. The moment you engage, you're playing her game on her field. Let her have the post. What we have is better. The relatives who saw it will understand the truth when they need to. And if some of them never do, that's painful, but it doesn't change the legal reality. A pause. Helen, the most powerful thing you can do right now is be completely, visibly unfazed. I said, I know you are. Let it show. The following 2 weeks moved quickly, the way time does when you are focused. Naomi and I worked through the estate plan with methodical care. She had referred me to an estate attorney in her network, a woman named Patricia Delgado who had spent 20 years specializing in exactly the kind of financial exploitation I was dealing with. Patricia was precise and warm and had a way of explaining complex legal instruments as if she were describing something as straightforward as a recipe, which I appreciated. We rebuilt everything from the ground up. My will, my trust, the beneficiary designations on my retirement accounts and insurance policies, the power of attorney which I now executed in Dorothea's name, because Dorothea was the person I trusted most in the world, and because she was constitutionally incapable of being manipulated into doing something she knew was wrong. Ryan and Brooke were removed from every document, everyone. In their place, the Roanoke Elder Legal Aid Center, which provided free legal representation to elderly residents facing exactly what I had faced, and a housing assistance program for widows, a cause that had been close to my heart since the months after Paul died, when I understood viscerally how vulnerable a woman alone could be to people who assumed her grief had impaired her judgment. I signed the final documents on a Friday afternoon in Patricia's office. She handed me the pen and I held it for just a moment before writing my name, because I wanted to feel the full weight of what I was doing. Not the anger, I was largely past anger by then, but the seriousness. This was not punishment. This was protection. This was what it looked like when a woman decided that her legacy would represent her values rather than reward people who had violated them. I signed that evening. I went to the Historical Society for the first time in 8 months. The meeting was in the upstairs room of the library, a space with tall windows and long tables covered in old maps and photograph collections. I knew most of the people there. Roanoke is a city with long memories and a small enough core of people invested in its history that you tend to see the same faces for decades. There was Gerald, who was working on a project about the Shenandoah Valley in the Depression era. There was Margaret, who was cataloging photographs from the 1940s. There was a new member I hadn't met, a man named Thomas who had recently retired from teaching and wanted to research his family's roots in the area. I sat down and Gerald handed me a folder of documents he'd been hoping I'd look at. Because of my background with property records, I looked at them, and I made notes, and I asked questions, and for 2 hours I was simply myself, a woman with expertise and curiosity, and a genuine interest in the particular way the past leaves its fingerprints on the present. Driving home that night I thought, this is what I lost. Not money. Money can be rebuilt, accounted for, documented in a spiral notebook. What I had lost in 4 years of orienting my life around Ryan and Brooke's financial instability was this: the evenings that belonged to me, the hours spent in rooms where I existed for my own reasons rather than somebody else's needs. I thought, I am not going to lose it again. 3 days later, Ryan called on a Sunday evening. Brooke and I had a fight, he said. I waited, a real one, not the kind we usually have. She wanted me to call you and ask you to reconsider the loan dispute. She said that if you'd just speak to the lender and clarify that there was a miscommunication, they could restart the application process. Ryan, I know, she wants me to tell a lender that forging my signature was a miscommunication. I know. I told her I wouldn't call you about that. A pause. She's not taking any of this well, Mom. That's not my responsibility. No, a long breath. No, it isn't. Silence. The contractors stopped work on the farmhouse. 3 of them. The deposits Brooke had promised, they were coming from the business account. And the account is, things are tight. They stopped work on Monday. I said nothing. We might have to sell it, he said. The farmhouse. We haven't even finished unpacking. I thought about saying something sympathetic. I thought about saying something practical. Then I thought about the fact that Ryan had, for 20 minutes, described a situation that was the direct consequence of his own choices without once offering an apology for what those choices had cost me. Not me financially, me, his mother, who had driven to their house with a casserole and found strangers loading the last of the furniture. Ryan, I said, I hope you and Brooke are able to work through this and build something real together. I mean that, but I can't help you with the farmhouse. I can't help you with Brooke's business. And I can't be part of a conversation about my financial situation that doesn't include an honest account of what happened. I'm trying to be honest. You're telling me about your problem, sex. That's not the same thing. A pause. When you're ready to talk about what you did, and not just what's happening to you because of it. I'm here. I will always be here, but I need you to know the difference. He was quiet for a moment. Then, okay, good night, Ryan. Good night, Mom. The call ended. I sat in the quiet of the house, the good quiet, the kind I was learning to live inside again rather than fill, and I thought about that single word. Not an apology, not a breakthrough, just one word, slightly smaller than the ones before it, like a door that hasn't opened yet but has shifted, just barely on its hinges. It was enough for now. The week after that, Naomi called with something she'd found embedded in the farmhouse purchase agreement, a detail so specific and so calculated that it stopped me cold when she read it to me over the phone. There's a clause, she said, in the purchase agreement for the farmhouse, under the section on contingency financing. A pause. Helen, they listed your home address as a property expected to generate sale proceeds that would be used to satisfy the mortgage in the event of default. I said, they listed my house, your home address, in the contingency section. As a backup asset, the full shape of it landed on me all at once. Not just my estate, my house, the physical structure where I lived, where Paul's desk sat, where the dogwood tree grew in the backyard. They had listed it as a contingency asset in a mortgage agreement without my knowledge, without my consent, without a single conversation. They had been planning in writing to take my home. Naomi, I said. My voice was very steady. How much time do we have before they're formally in default on the farmhouse? If the contractors don't resume and the mortgage payment falls through, approximately 6 weeks. All right. What do I need to do to make sure my name cannot be used in any collection or liquidation proceedings related to that property? I've already drafted the notice. I just need your signature. When can you bring it? Tomorrow morning, I'll have coffee ready. After we hung up, I sat at Paul's desk for a long time. I looked at the locked drawer. I thought about everything it had held over the past weeks, the records, the documents, the new estate plan, the slow, careful building of a wall between my life and the one they had been planning to have at my expense. I thought about Brooke in that new farmhouse. In the kitchen, I had heard over the phone when she said, "I suppose we forgot to tell you." And I thought about all the things she thought she knew about me. She thought she knew how I would react. She thought she had calculated correctly. She thought that a 68-year-old widow in Roanoke, Virginia, who had spent 30 years in a county office and loved her son more than she was careful, was something she could manage. She had forgotten, or perhaps she had never known, that I had spent 30 years working with property records and legal documents because I understood that the law was not a system that rewarded the loudest or the most confident. It rewarded the most documented. I had documentation. The following Tuesday, I went back to the watercolor class. I sat between Constance and Arthur again. Arthur had finished a small painting of a barn he remembered from his childhood in rural Kentucky. It was not technically perfect, the perspective was a little off, the proportions uncertain in places, but there was something in it that was entirely and unmistakably real. You could feel that it mattered to him. "It's beautiful," I told him. "It's crooked," he said. "So is most of what's worth remembering." I looked at my own canvas, which was just beginning to take shape. "Is it the barn you remember? Or the way it made you feel?" He thought about that for a moment. "Both, I think." "Then it's exactly right," I said. I picked up my brush. I mixed a blue that was not quite the color of the sky over Clover Ridge Road but was close enough to remind me of it, and I began to paint. I did not think about Ryan. I did not think about Brooke. I did not think about farmhouses or loan applications or contingency clauses or social media posts. For those 2 hours, I thought about color and water and the particular quality of light that falls on things you love and whether I could get it right on the page. Outside, Roanoke went about its Tuesday morning, and somewhere 90 miles away, Brooke Calloway was discovering what it meant to operate without a safety net she had never earned. I painted and said nothing. I was very good at saying nothing. I had learned over the previous weeks that nothing was sometimes the most powerful sentence available to me. What came next, I had not anticipated. I should have. Looking back, the pieces were all visible, but I was focused on the legal logistics, on the documents and the accounts and the formal notices, and I had underestimated how far Brooke was willing to go when she realized the ground was shifting beneath her. The call came on a Thursday evening, 4.5 weeks after I'd stood in their empty rental house with a casserole going cold in my hands. It was not Ryan, it was not Naomi, it was my sister's daughter, Carol, the same niece who had sent me the screenshot of Brooke's social media post. Aunt Helen. Her voice was careful in the way that meant she was about to say something she had rehearsed. "I need to tell you something, and I want you to know that I'm only telling you because I think you deserve to know." "Go ahead." Brooke called Grandma Ruth. My mother had been gone for 9 years, so I understood immediately that she meant Ruth Calloway, Brooke's mother. But that wasn't what stopped me. "Brooke called your grandmother?" "Brooke called Grandma Elaine." A pause. "Your Aunt Dad's oldest sister, Elaine, 81 years old, sharpest memory in the family and the person who had, at various family gatherings over the years, been most vocal about how I should let Ryan and Brooke stand on their own 2 feet. A woman who loved me but had, more than once, gently suggested that my financial involvement in Ryan's life was enabling dependency." "What did she say to Elaine?" "She told her that you'd cut them off without warning, that you'd canceled everything with no explanation, that you were punishing them for moving." Carol's voice tightened slightly. She cried on the phone. Grandma Elaine said she was very upset. I sat with that for a moment. Brooke had called my 81-year-old aunt. She had performed distress on the phone. She was working the family network now because the lender wasn't working and the contractors had stopped and the farmhouse was going sideways and she needed allies. "Carol," I said, "how many people did she call?" A pause that told me the answer was more than one. "I heard about Grandma Elaine and Uncle Jim. Possibly a few others, Jim. My late husband's younger brother, who sent a Christmas card every year and attended every family funeral and thought very well of Ryan because Ryan had the kind of easy, surface warmth that made men like Jim feel comfortable. I thought about Naomi's advice. The most powerful thing you can do is be completely, visibly unfazed. Carol, thank you for telling me. I appreciate it. Are you okay? I'm completely fine, and I meant it. If Elaine or Jim or anyone else asks you about this, don't defend me. Just tell them you don't know the full story. That's the truth. But I do know, Carol said. I know Brooke forged your signature. I know what she did. You know what I told you. And I trust you completely. But a family argument is not the same as a legal case, and I don't want anyone speaking on my behalf without facts they can document. A pause. The facts will become clear in time. They always do. After I hung up, I picked up my phone and sent Naomi a text. She's calling family members. Elaine, Jim, possibly others. No specifics. Naomi replied, in 4 minutes expected document who she contacted and when if you can. It matters for pattern of behavior. You're doing beautifully. I set the phone down. I thought Brooke had expected me to crumble. She had expected that the social media post would generate enough family pressure to make me reconsider, and when it didn't, she had escalated to direct phone calls, targeting the oldest and most sentiment-driven members of my extended family. She was building pressure from every direction she could reach. What she had not accounted for was that I had been building something too. Quietly, without announcement, without a single social media post, I had been building a case, and in approximately 6 weeks, unless something changed dramatically, Ryan and Brooke were going to be sitting across from me, either voluntarily or because events forced them to be, and I was going to be the one in the room with documentation. I was going to be the most prepared person at that table. I closed my eyes for a moment in the quiet house, and I listened to the particular sound of a spring evening through the window, a car passing, 2 streets over a dog, the creak of the dogwood tree in the light wind. I thought, I am not afraid of what comes next. I thought, let them come. 6 weeks is a long time when you are waiting for something you know is coming. I filled those weeks the way I had filled every difficult stretch of my life, by staying in motion. Tuesday watercolor classes, Thursday historical society meetings, Sunday dinners with Dorothea and Frank. I called my doctor and updated my emergency contacts. I had a small plumbing issue in the upstairs bathroom, and I called the repairman myself, paid him myself, and felt a satisfaction in that transaction that was entirely out of proportion to its size. I was learning again what it felt like to manage my own life without one eye always on someone else's crisis. But I was also watching, quietly, carefully, the way I had spent 30 years watching public records for the small irregularities that revealed larger problems. Ryan called every 4 or 5 days. The calls were brief and careful, circling around the things we hadn't said yet without quite landing on them. He told me the contractors had resumed work after Brooke renegotiated one of the payment schedules. He told me Brooke was pursuing a smaller private investor for the business. He told me in a voice that was trying to sound casual and not managing it, that things were stabilizing. I listened. I asked small questions. I did not offer anything he could use. Then one Sunday afternoon, Dorothea called me from her kitchen in a voice that meant she had something specific to say and had been deciding whether to say it. I had coffee with Barbara Kinney yesterday, she said. Barbara Kinney was part of our extended social circle, a woman whose daughter had worked briefly with Brooke on a staging project 2 years ago. She said something I think you need to hear. Go ahead. She said, Brooke has been telling people that you've had some cognitive decline, that the reason for the financial changes is that you're not entirely lucid and that Ryan is trying to manage the situation delicately. The room went very still. She said, what? Cognitive decline, Helen. She's telling people your memory is going. I sat down. Of all the things I had anticipated, the social media narrative, the family calls, the pressure campaigns, this one I had not seen coming. And the reason it landed so hard was because I understood immediately how effective it was. A 68-year-old widow who suddenly cancels all financial support and changes her will. If you plant the right seed in the right soil, people will water it themselves. They will remember every time I repeated a story. They will reinterpret every strong decision as confusion. They will say quietly, among themselves, poor Helen. She was always so sharp. It's sad what time does. It was the most dangerous thing Brooke had done yet. Because it didn't require documentation, it only required doubt. How many people has she said this to? Barbara heard it from 2 different sources. So enough, Dorothea, I need you to listen carefully. If anyone says this to you directly, I want you to do one thing. Name it. Ask them if they've spoken with me recently. Ask them to describe a single specific thing I said or did that suggested impairment. They won't be able to because there isn't one, and then ask them gently, not confrontationally, whether they find it interesting that this information is coming exclusively from someone who stands to benefit financially from my being considered incompetent. Dorothea was quiet for a moment. Helen, you're terrifying. I spent 30 years in a county deed office. I know exactly how narratives get constructed around vulnerable people, and I know exactly how to dismantle them. I paused. I'm also calling Naomi in the morning. Good. And Dorothea, thank you for always telling me you'd do the same. You have done the same. A pause. Are you eating? Yes. Are you sleeping? Mostly. Good enough, she said. Call me after you talk to Naomi. I called Naomi at 7:45 the next morning. I didn't wait for her office to open. I called her cell, which she had given me with instructions to use it when something was urgent. She's questioning my mental competency, I said when she answered. Spreading it socially, not formally, no legal filing, just word of mouth, enough to create a narrative. Naomi was quiet for 3 seconds. I counted. Helen, that changes the urgency of one thing we've been planning, the competency evaluation. Yes. I want you to see Dr. Patricia Morrow this week. She's a neuropsychologist. She's done this kind of evaluation before in financial exploitation cases, and her documentation is unimpeachable. A pause, a formal cognitive evaluation on record, administered by a respected clinician, given voluntarily and proactively. That is the cleanest possible rebuttal to what Brooke is doing. Schedule it. I'll call her office when it opens at 9. And Naomi, I wanted on the record that I requested this myself, that I walked in voluntarily and asked for the evaluation because I wanted documentation of my competency, not because anyone required it. Absolutely. A brief pause. Helen, I want to say something that's slightly outside my lane as your attorney. Say it. What Brooke is doing right now, the cognitive narrative, that is what someone does when they are genuinely frightened. Not confident, frightened. She is throwing everything she has because she can see the ground moving and she doesn't know how to stop it. A pause. You are winning. I want you to know that. I took a breath. Thank you, Naomi. The evaluation with Dr. Morrow happened that Wednesday. It was 3 hours long, thorough in the way that a serious medical procedure is thorough, not punishing, but complete. Memory recall, executive function, language processing, abstract reasoning, spatial orientation. She asked me about my work history, my daily routines, my financial decision-making process. She asked me to explain in my own words the situation I was navigating. I explained it clearly in chronological order with specificity. When we finished, she looked at me over her desk, with the particular expression of a clinician who has seen a great many things and is choosing her words because she means them precisely. Mrs. Whitaker, your cognitive function is entirely within normal range for your age. In fact, several markers place you in the above-average range for your demographic. Your recall, your reasoning, and your decision-making are all consistent and coherent. A pause. And I want to say, as a professional who works with financial exploitation cases, what you have described, the way you have documented it, the way you have responded is exactly what clear-minded, capable action looks like. I thanked her. I drove home. I called Naomi and told her the evaluation was complete. Perfect, Naomi said. I'll request the written report. When it's in hand, we'll have it notarized and added to your file. She paused. And now we wait. We didn't wait long. The call came on a Friday evening. It was Ryan. His voice was different from any of the other calls, tighter, with an undercurrent of something that took me a moment to identify. Urgency, but not the usual kind. This wasn't the urgency of a financial problem. This was the urgency of a person who had been told to make a call they didn't want to make. Mom, Brooke and I want to come see you. Sunday evening. Is something wrong? We think it's time to sit down face to face. Brooke has some ideas she wants to share with you. About a path forward. I knew what that meant. I had known for 2 weeks that something like this was coming. You don't forge signatures, build fraudulent investor materials, call family members, and spread a cognitive decline narrative without eventually arriving at the moment where you have to look the person in the eye and make your play. I thought about Naomi's advice. I thought about the document sitting in Patricia Delgado's files, the new estate plan, signed, notarized, complete. I thought about what Brooke's ideas about a path forward almost certainly contained. Sunday evening is fine, I said. Come at 6. I called Naomi the moment I hung up. They're coming Sunday, 6 o'clock. Do you want me there? Yes. But not visibly. I want you in the house before they arrive, and I want you to stay in the study until I need you. A pause. You already know what they're going to propose. I have a very good idea. Do you want to walk through it? No, I said. I want to be in the room without a script. I want to hear exactly what she says, in her own words without having rehearsed my reaction. A pause. But I want you there with everything. I'll be there at 5. Sunday arrived the way consequential days often do, ordinary on the surface, charged underneath. I spent the morning painting, not because I was calm exactly, but because painting required enough focus to prevent me from running and rerunning the anticipated conversation. I had the radio on low. I drank my coffee slowly. I moved through my house with the deliberate ease of someone who knows exactly where she stands and has made her peace with it. Naomi arrived at 5 with a leather briefcase and the focused expression of someone who had slept well and eaten a proper lunch and was entirely prepared for whatever came next. I made coffee. We sat in the kitchen for a while without discussing the case. She told me about her daughter's college visit. I told her about Arthur's painting of the Kentucky barn, and then at 5:50 she gathered her things and moved quietly into the study, pulling the door to but not fully closed. At 6:04, headlights swept across the front window. I heard 2 car doors. Footsteps on the porch, the doorbell. I opened the door. Ryan looked tired in a way that had aged him, not sick, just worn, the way a person looks when they have been living in sustained tension for several weeks. He met my eyes and then looked slightly away, the way he used to as a boy when he'd done something he hadn't yet apologized for. Brooke looked precisely the same as always. That was the thing about Brooke, she didn't wear her states on the outside. She was composed and well-dressed, and her expression was calibrated to suggest that she was here out of genuine concern rather than calculated necessity. She had a folder under her arm. "Helen," she said. "Thank you for having us. Come in." I did not offer Brooke a hug. I did not make a production of not offering one. I simply stepped back from the door and let them through, and I led them to the kitchen table, and I put the coffee on because it gave my hands something to do, and because the ordinary ritual of hospitality is sometimes the most clarifying thing you can bring to a charged situation. We sat, I poured, nobody spoke for a moment, and I did not fill the silence. I had learned in 30 years of county office work that the person who fills silence first is usually the person who most needs something from the other. Brooke opened the folder. "Helen, I know the past several weeks have been difficult for everyone. I want to start by saying that Ryan and I both understand that we handled the transition, the move, in a way that was hurtful, and we're sorry about that." The apology landed like a stone in shallow water. "Quick, small, immediately past," I said. "We've been doing a lot of thinking, and we've come up with something we think could really work for everyone. Something that addresses the financial uncertainty we've all been feeling." She slid the folder across the table. "We want to walk you through a proposal." I looked at the folder but did not open it. "Go ahead, the farmhouse has incredible potential. As a venue, as a short-term rental, as the home base for Hearth and Haven's expansion. The bones are there, the renovation is 70% complete. What we need is the capital to finish it." She paused. "The Clover Ridge house is large, Helen, for one person. The upkeep alone, it's manageable," I said, "of course. But what we're proposing is," she glanced at Ryan, who was looking at the table. "What if you considered selling the Clover Ridge house, using the proceeds to invest in the farmhouse and in Hearth and Haven, and relocating to something smaller? Something designed for where you are in your life right now." I looked at her. I looked at Ryan. I looked back at her. "A retirement apartment," I said. "Something comfortable and appropriate. With resources closer to Brooke. I want to make sure I understand the proposal correctly. You're suggesting I sell my home, give you the proceeds, move into a smaller facility, and invest my remaining capital in a business that is currently in default on its contractor payments and whose previous loan application was suspended due to a fraudulent signature." The room was extremely quiet. Ryan looked up from the table. Brooke's composure did not break, I will give her that, but something shifted behind it. A recalibration. She had expected me to be softer than this. She had expected the proposal to land gently because she had wrapped it gently, and she had expected that I, like most people who are told their house is a burden and their age is a liability, would feel the familiar flutter of self-doubt and reach for accommodation. "The signature situation was a misunderstanding," she said. "It's been clarified." "It has not been clarified. It has been disputed by my attorney in writing to the lender." "Those are different things, Helen, and I want to ask you something directly." "Brooke, look at me, please." She looked at me. "If I had no house, no savings, and no inheritance waiting for you, if I were a 68-year-old widow with nothing to offer, financially, would you be sitting at this table?" She opened her mouth, closed it. I turned to Ryan. "Would you?" He could not hold my eyes. He looked at the table and he stayed there, and that was its own kind of answer. Brooke reset. I could see her doing it, a small shift in her posture, a change in the temperature of her voice. "Helen, I understand you're upset, but this is a critical moment for our family, and we need you to be practical rather than emotional. This decision isn't just about you, it affects all of us." "You're right," I said. "It does affect all of you." I stood up from the table. I walked to the hallway. I said clearly and without raising my voice, "Naomi." The study door opened. Naomi entered the kitchen carrying her leather briefcase, and the look on Brooke's face in that moment, the precise instant she understood that I had known they were coming, and had prepared accordingly, was something I will carry with me for a very long time. It was not quite fear, it was the specific cold expression of someone who has just realized they miscalculated the distance to the floor. "Brooke, Ryan." Naomi set the briefcase on the counter and opened it with the clean efficiency of someone who has done this many times. "I'm Helen's attorney. I have a few things to share with you." She placed the documents on the table one at a time. The formal dispute letter to Piedmont Commercial Lending, the investor packet with the flagged language about family trust assets, the documented timeline of the unauthorized signature, the farmhouse purchase agreement with my home address in the contingency section, the repayment ledger $96,412, dated and itemized. "The lender has been fully briefed," Naomi said, in the level, precise voice she used when she wanted every word to land clearly. "The 3 private investors who received the misleading materials have been notified. One has already engaged his own attorney. The cognitive competency evaluation has been completed and documented." She paused. "And any further use of Helen's name, signature, property, or assets in any financial document without her explicit written consent will result in immediate legal action." Brooke stared at the table of documents. Then she turned to Ryan, and in that turn, in that single movement of her head toward her husband, I saw the thing I had been watching for. The expectation. She turned to Ryan the way someone turns to a wall they have always assumed was solid. Ryan looked at the documents. He looked at me. He looked at Brooke. I knew, he said. His voice was quiet and flat and utterly exhausted. Mom, I'm sorry. I knew what she was doing with the investor materials. I didn't know about the signature, but I knew about the rest of it. And I told myself it would work out, and he stopped. I'm sorry, Brooke, said Ryan. He shook his head once. Small, but definitive. Brooke turned back to me. The composure was still there, but it had changed quality. It was no longer performance. It was something harder and more honest, the composure of someone who has run out of plays and is deciding whether to accept that. What do you want? She said. I want what I've always wanted. Honesty. A relationship with my son that is based on those things. I paused. What I don't want is to spend the time I have left being managed. I reached for the last document on the table. Naomi had set it slightly apart from the others. I slid it across to them. It was my new estate plan, the relevant pages, the beneficiary designations, the trustee assignments, the charitable distributions. Their names were not on it. The Roanoke Elder Legal Aid Center was. The housing program for widows was. The sum total of what I had built over a lifetime, directed toward people who would use it to protect others from exactly what had been done to me. Brooke looked at it for a long time. She turned one page, then another. She set it down. She said nothing. For a moment, the kitchen was completely silent, the particular silence of a room where something irreversible has just been understood. Then Brooke picked up the folder she'd brought, placed it back under her arm, and stood up from the table. We should go, she said to Ryan. Ryan did not move immediately. He sat looking at the estate plan, and I watched something work through his face that was more complicated than I could name. Not just shame, not just grief. Something quieter and more fundamental, the look of a man beginning to understand the difference between the story he'd been telling himself and the story that was actually true. Ryan, Brooke said. He looked up at me. I'll call you, he said. If that's I'd like to call you. You know where to find me. He stood. He followed Brooke to the door. He paused with his hand on the frame, and for a moment I thought he might say something more. But he didn't. He just nodded, once the way his father used to nod when words weren't the right tool, and then he was gone. The door closed, headlights again. The sound of a car reversing. Naomi stood in my kitchen with her briefcase and said nothing for a moment. You're all right? Yes, you did everything correctly tonight. I know. I looked at the document still on the table. Naomi, thank you for all of it, for being here, she nodded. She began gathering the papers. I'll see myself out in a few minutes. You should sit. Sat. I looked at my kitchen, the blue canisters, the crooked drawer, the window where the dogwood tree was just barely visible in the dark outside. I thought about Brooke's face when Naomi walked in. I thought about Ryan's voice saying I knew. I thought about that single, quiet word I knew and everything it contained. The years of looking away, the years of choosing silence, the careful self-deception of a person who had told himself that not objecting was different from consenting. It was not different. He knew that now. I thought about what Brooke had said, what do you want? And I thought about what I hadn't said out loud, which was the simplest and most permanent thing. I want to matter to my son for reasons that have nothing to do with my bank account or my property value or the date on my death certificate. I wanted to matter the way parents are supposed to matter. Not as a resource, as a person. I didn't know yet whether Ryan was capable of that. The honest answer was that I didn't know whether anyone was capable of fundamental change until you saw them make it, slowly over time in the absence of any reward for doing so. I was willing to wait and see. I was not willing to fund the wait. Naomi let herself out at 8:30, the door closing softly behind her. I sat for a while longer, then I washed the coffee cups, wiped down the table, and turned off the kitchen light. I went to Paul's desk. I opened the locked drawer. I looked at the notebook, the 4 years of dates and amounts and descriptions, and then I closed the drawer and locked it, because it was done. Everything that needed to be documented was documented. Everything that needed to be filed was filed. Everything that needed to be said had been said. I sat back in Paul's chair. I thought about something Naomi had said weeks ago. That first morning at her office table, you are not required to protect him from the consequences of his choices. I had thought then that she was talking about the legal situation. Sitting in the quiet of the house that night, I understood she had meant something larger. Not just the loan, not just the documents, not just the farmhouse and the business and the fraudulent investor materials. The consequence of choosing, year after year, to stay silent while your wife used your mother's name and your mother's money and your mother's eventual death as the foundation of a business plan. The consequence of that was this: sitting in a car in your mother's driveway, having watched her slide a document across a table that proved she had survived you. That was the consequence. I had not designed it as punishment. I had not planned this evening as a performance. I had simply, finally, stopped protecting Ryan from the weight of his own choices. And whatever happened next, whatever slow, uncertain, possibly impossible process of rebuilding might or might not begin, it would have to begin from there. From the truth, from the real floor of what had happened, not the comfortable story on top of it. I turned off the desk lamp. Outside, the dogwood tree moved in the wind. Somewhere, 90 miles away, Ryan and Brooke were driving back to a farmhouse they might not be able to keep. They had arrived with a folder full of plans. They had left with a document that told them exactly where they stood. I had given Brooke what she said she wanted, complete independence. Now she would find out what that actually cost. The morning after they left, I slept until 7:30. I want to say something about that, because it might seem like a small thing, but for the previous 6 weeks, I had been waking at 5, sometimes 4:30, my mind already moving through documents and timelines and anticipated conversations before I was fully conscious. That kind of vigilance has a cost that you don't always notice until it stops. I woke at 7:30 on that Monday morning and lay still for a moment, listening to the house, and I realized that something had lifted. Not everything, the situation was not resolved, the legal threads were still live. Ryan was still somewhere out there in a half-renovated farmhouse with a marriage that was straining at every seam. But the thing I had been bracing for, the confrontation I had spent weeks preparing for, had happened. I had been in the room, I had said what needed saying, and I was still here, in my own house, entirely intact. I got up, I made coffee, I stood at the kitchen window and watched a cardinal work through the dogwood tree, and I thought, today I am going to do exactly what I want to do. What I wanted to do was paint. I spent 3 hours at my easel that morning, working on a piece I'd started the previous week, not the backyard view, something different this time. I was working from memory on a landscape I hadn't thought about in years, the view from the ridge above Douthit State Park, where Paul and I had hiked every September for almost 2 decades, the particular quality of light in that valley in early fall, the way the tree line looked from above, layer after layer of color receding into a blue distance that felt infinite. I had never painted it before. I had always thought I was saving it for when I was good enough. Standing at the easel that morning, I understood that I had been good enough for years and simply hadn't trusted it. I was finishing the first wash of color on the ridgeline when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, a local area code but not a number in my contacts. Mrs. Whitaker, this is James Aldridge. I'm an attorney. I represent a private investor who has a financial interest in Hearth and Haven Enterprises. I was hoping to speak with you about some materials that were shared with my client. I set down my brush. Mr. Aldridge, my attorney is Naomi Bennett. I'd prefer that any formal communication go through her office, of course. I just wanted to make personal contact first because what I have to share might actually be useful to you. A pause. My client invested $50,000 in Hearth and Haven based on representations made in an investor packet. Among those representations was a claim that family trust assets would eventually support the business, specifically assets associated with your estate. I'm aware of the packet. My client is not interested in pursuing action against you, Mrs. Whitaker. He understands that you were not a willing participant in those representations. What he is interested in is recovering his investment from Ms. Calloway. Directly a pause, and in that process, my client's documentation may be useful to your own situation. We may have interests that align. I picked up a pen. Give me your number. My attorney will call you today. I called Naomi before I'd set the phone down. A private investor's attorney just contacted me, James Aldridge. He says his client wants to recover $15,000 from Brooke directly and believes our documentation aligns with his case. Naomi was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. That is the first genuinely good news we've had in a month. I thought so. I'll call him within the hour. Helen, this matters. A private investor with independent legal representation filing a claim against Hearth and Haven based on misrepresentation. That is a completely separate pressure point that has nothing to do with you. It's the system working the way it's supposed to work. What does it mean for Brooke? It means she is no longer just managing a family dispute. She is managing a legal claim from an outside party. A pause. And if Aldridge's documentation includes copies of the investor packet with your estate referenced as collateral, that becomes part of the formal record in a civil proceeding, which becomes public. Naomi confirmed. Yes, I looked at my half-finished painting on the easel. All right, call him, keep me informed. I went back to painting. The ridge took shape slowly, the way things do when you're working from the inside of a memory rather than a reference. I had to feel for the right color rather than see it, and there is something clarifying about that, about having to trust what you know rather than what you can check. Ryan called at 2 in the afternoon. His voice when he said my name had a different quality than any of the calls before. The carefulness was still there, but the calculation was gone. He sounded, for the first time in a long time, simply tired. Can I talk to you? Yes, not about the business. Not about money, I need to talk to you, Mom. I set down my coffee cup. I'm listening, a long exhale. Brooke and I were up most of the night. After we got home, it was the worst fight we've ever had. Not about you, about us, about thing had been wrong for a long time that we've both been pretending weren't. I waited. She blames you. She's going to keep blaming you. I want you to know that I understand that's not fair. And I understand that telling you it's not fair doesn't fix anything." He stopped. "I keep going back to what you asked me at the table. Whether I'd be there if you had nothing." He stopped again. "The fact that I couldn't answer that should have been impossible. I should have been able to answer that before you finished the sentence. Ryan, I thought about Dad last night. I thought about the way he talked about you when you weren't in the room. Like you were, I don't know how to describe it, like you were the evidence that the world was reasonable. Like pointing to you was the way he explained to himself why things made sense." His voice broke slightly on the last sentence and then recovered. "I stopped seeing you that way. At some point I stopped seeing you as a person entirely, and I saw the account, I saw the safety net, and I told myself that was love because it felt like security, and I confused the two. I had not expected this. I had expected many things from Ryan over the coming weeks and months, more practical conversations, more careful negotiations, the slow work of establishing what a functional relationship might look like going forward. I had not expected this, the real thing, unmediated and unstrategic, at 2 p.m. on a Monday. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "I don't expect it to change anything. What I mean is I don't expect you to do anything with it. I'm not saying it to get something back. I know I'm saying it because I need to say it. Because I've been a pause. I've been rehearsing conversations in my head for weeks, and every version of them was about what I needed you to understand, what I needed you to feel, what I needed you to do. And last night I thought, when was the last time I had a conversation with my mother that was actually about her?" I could not speak for a moment. "It's been a long time," I said finally. "Yeah," a long exhale. "Yeah, it has. We stayed on the phone for a while after that without talking much. He asked about the painting I was working on. I told him about the ridge at Douthat, the September hikes, the way the light looked from up there. He remembered 2 of those hikes. He had come with us 3 times as a teenager, reluctantly, and had complained about the elevation and then gone completely quiet at the top, the way teenagers do when something is more beautiful than they expected, and they don't have the vocabulary for it yet. Dad used to say the mountain was teaching you how small you were," Ryan said. "In a good way, in the way that makes everything feel more manageable. That sounds like him." "I miss him, so do I said. "Every day we said goodbye without resolving anything practical, and that was exactly right. There was nothing practical to resolve in that conversation. It was just 2 people who loved each other, talking across the distance that had grown between them, taking a first careful step. It wasn't forgiveness yet. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was honest. That was enough for one afternoon. Naomi called back at 4:30. I spoke with Aldridge for 40 minutes. His client's documentation is solid signed copies of the investor packet, email correspondence with Brooke bank transfer records. He's filing a civil claim against Hearth and Haven within the week. A pause. "And Helen, there's something else. Something Aldridge told me that I need to share with you. Go ahead." His client wasn't the only investor who received the packet. There were at least 5 people total. Aldridge knows of 2 others who are considering joining the claim. She paused carefully. "The total amount invested across all of them may be close to $60,000. The number landed heavily. $60,000, 5 people, 5 individuals who had made financial decisions based on a document that described my estate as guaranteed backing. 5 families whose retirement money, whose savings, had been funneled into a business built on a lie." "Naomi," I said, "what can I do for those investors? You're already doing it. Your formal dispute letters to the lender, your documentation of the fraudulent signature, your estate plan changes, all of that becomes part of the evidentiary record in any civil proceeding. You are not a defendant here. You are, in the eyes of the law, a fellow victim." A pause. "But if you want to do something more, your testimony, if it comes to that, would be significant." "Whatever is needed," I said. "Whatever helps them recover what they lost." "I know," Naomi said quietly. "I know it does." 3 days later I got a call from my cousin Jim. Uncle Jim, as I'd always called him, Paul's younger brother. 64 years old, a retired civil engineer who lived in Lynchburg and sent Christmas cards with a different scenic photograph every year. Jim was a good man, fundamentally decent, but he processed the world through surfaces, and Brooke had always known how to manage surfaces. He had liked Brooke from the first family dinner, found her charming and energetic, and had mentioned to me more than once, gently and with the best intentions, that I was lucky to have such a motivated daughter-in-law. "Helen," he said, "I hope I'm not overstepping. You're not." "Go ahead, Jim. I talked to Brooke a few weeks back. She seemed very upset. She said you'd cut them off and were threatening legal action." A pause. "I want to say first that I should have called you immediately, and I didn't, and I'm sorry for that. It's all right. It's not Actually, I've known you for 34 years, and I let a 20-minute phone call from someone I've met 15 times make me uncertain about your judgment. That's not something I'm proud of." His voice was careful and genuinely uncomfortable. "Can I ask what actually happened?" I told him. "Not everything, not the full legal detail, but enough. The move without notice, the loan application with the forged signature, the investor packet, the family trust language, the farmhouse contingency clause." Jim was silent for a long time when I finished. "She forged your signature, a digital reproduction. Close enough to pass initial review." Helen, a pause. "I owe you an apology that is considerably more serious than the one I started with. You didn't know." "Jim, I should have called you before I let doubt set in. That's the part I'm responsible for." A long exhale. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing. You don't need to do anything." I paused. "If Elaine or anyone else asks you directly, you can tell them you spoke with me and you believe I'm handling the situation correctly. That's all that I can do." He paused. "Is Ryan, how is he?" "He's struggling. He's being honest, which is more than I expected." A pause. "He's going to be all right, Jim. It's going to take time. And you?" "I'm painting again," I said. "I'm sleeping. I'm fine. Paul would be proud of you," he said quietly. I held on to that for a moment. "I hope so," I said. "I hope so." The following week, Naomi called with the news I had been expecting and bracing for simultaneously. The farmhouse was formally in default. The mortgage payment had not been made. The lender had issued a notice. Ryan and Brooke had 30 days. "Ryan knows," I said. It wasn't a question. He would have received the notice at the same time. I sat with the phone and thought about what to do. There was a version of me, the version from 4 years ago, the version who had spent a decade absorbing every financial shockwave that moved through Ryan's life, who would have already reached for her checkbook. Not because it was right, because the alternative was watching my son lose his home, and there is a specific physical pain attached to that prospect that does not respond to logic. I did not reach for the checkbook. Ryan called that evening. "We got the default notice. I know. I'm not calling to ask you to help with the mortgage." His voice was flat but clear. "I want you to know that. I'm not calling for money. I know that too. I think we're going to have to sell it. The farmhouse we can't without the business loan. Without the investor backing, there's no way to finish the renovation. And without the renovation, the property value isn't where it needs to be." A pause. "I'm trying to think about it practically. I'm not always succeeding, but I'm trying. That's all you can do." "Brooke isn't. She's not all taking it well." A long silence. "She's talking about moving to be closer to her mother in Charlottesville. Would that be a good thing?" A pause that lasted long enough to be its own answer. "I don't know, Mom. I genuinely don't know." There was something in that, in his uncertainty, in the way he said "I genuinely don't know" without wrapping it in reassurance or deflection, that felt like solid ground. "Not comfortable, not resolved, but real, Ryan," I said. "I want to tell you something, and I want you to hear it as exactly what it is. Not as a door to anything else. Okay, I am going to keep loving you. That's not something that's in negotiation, and it's not something you need to earn back. It's just true, the same way it's been true since the day you were born." I paused. "What is in negotiation, what has to be rebuilt slowly and carefully, is trust. And trust doesn't come back because someone wants it to. It comes back because of what people do over time, when there's nothing to gain from doing it." "I understand," he said. "I'm not asking for it back yet." "Good, because this is the beginning of a very long road, and the only way it goes anywhere worth going is if we're both honest about where we're starting from." "Where are we starting from?" I thought about that for a moment. "From the truth," I said, "which is further along than we were 6 weeks ago." He was quiet, and in the quiet I could hear him sitting with that, not reaching for something better, just accepting what was actual. That too felt like solid ground. The farmhouse sold 8 weeks later, not for what they'd paid, not after an unfinished renovation and a default notice, but for enough to cover the mortgage balance and the outstanding contractor debts. Ryan and Brooke moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Charlottesville. Ryan took a salaried position with a civil engineering firm. Brooke took a job with a real estate staging company, not her own business, someone else's, with a regular paycheck and no investor materials and no family trust language. I learned this not from Ryan but from Naomi, who had continued monitoring the situation through the civil claim process. The private investor's suit was moving forward. Aldridge's client was the lead plaintiff. The claim was for the full amount invested, just under $60,000 plus damages. Brooke's response to the suit, when it was filed, was what I had expected. She hired an attorney and contested the characterization of the investor materials as fraudulent. She maintained that the language about family trust assets was aspirational rather than representational. Her attorney filed a motion suggesting that I had verbally indicated my intention to support the business. Naomi handled it with the same precise efficiency she brought to everything. She submitted the competency evaluation, the documented timeline of the unauthorized signature, the formal dispute letters, the estate plan, and a sworn affidavit from me stating clearly and in detail that I had never verbally, in writing or in any other form, authorized the use of my name, estate, or assets in any Hearth and Haven materials. The motion was denied. I was sitting with Dorothy on her back porch when Naomi called to tell me. Motion denied, she said. Her claim that you verbally indicated support is not going to survive the evidentiary record. I looked at Dorothea across the table. Motion denied, I said to her. Dorothea raised her coffee mug. To documentation, I agreed. But something happened the week after motion was denied that I had not anticipated, and that changed the shape of how I understood everything that had come before. Ryan called on a Wednesday morning. His voice was different again, not the exhausted honesty of the afternoon call, not the careful flatness of the earlier ones. This was something else. Something younger, Mom. I need to tell you something. Go ahead. Brooke's attorney told her that the motion was denied, that the judge isn't going to accept the verbal authorization argument. A pause. Brooke told me last night that she thinks we should settle. That fighting it is going to cost more than settling. That's probably correct. She also said he stopped. A long pause. She said that she'd been planning to use your estate since before we got married. The words landed like something dropped from a height. She said what? She said she'd always thought she knew from early on that I was your only child, and that you didn't have other family to leave things to. And she said she'd built her business plan around that from the beginning. His voice was very quiet. Not the fraud part. She didn't plan the fraud from the beginning, but the idea that your money would eventually be theirs. She said she'd always thought of it as part of the math. I sat down. Part of the math. I thought back to the winery outside Charlottesville. 7 years ago, Brooke in her wedding dress, stunning and certain, filling every room. I thought about the $5,000 check I'd written as a gift, and whether, somewhere behind that gorgeous smile, she had noted it as confirmation. I thought about the first phone call, a year in Ryan's careful voice, the car insurance, just this once. I thought about whether Brooke had been patient enough and strategic enough to let that first request come from Ryan, knowing I would say yes, knowing that yes would lead to yes, would lead to yes, would lead to $96,000 and a business plan built around my death. I thought about my father's saying, the truth doesn't get easier to face with time. It just gets more expensive to avoid, Ryan, I said. How long have you known this? A long pause, the longest of all the pauses in all the conversations we had had. I suspected, he said finally. I didn't let myself know it fully. But I suspected. There it was, not a villain, not a puppet. A man who had made a long series of choices to not quite look at something that would have required him to act, and who had confused his own comfort with innocence. Okay, I said, thank you for telling me, Mom. Ryan. I mean it, thank you. That took something real, a very long silence. What do we do with this? He asked. We don't do anything with it right now. Right now you focus on the settlement and on stabilizing your life. I paused. And you let me sit with what you just told me for a while. Are you angry? I thought about that honestly. I'm tired, I said, not at you, just tired of the size of it. Tired of how long this has been going on without my knowing. A pause. But I'm grateful that you told me even now. Even when it costs you, it costs me a lot less than it cost you. Yes, I said. It does. We said goodbye gently. I sat for a long time after that. Not at Paul's desk, not with the notebook, just in the chair by the window where the afternoon light came through at a low angle and made the room feel warmer than it was. I thought about Brooke at that first dinner, all those years ago, looking at me across the table with her quick laugh and her confident plans. I thought about how much I had wanted to love her, how readily I had decided she was exactly what Ryan needed. I thought she was looking at me that night and calculating. I thought I was looking at her that night and hoping. And I thought, after a while, that I did not regret the hoping. That hoping is not naivety. That opening yourself to someone and being wrong about them is one of the costs of being fully human, and it is a cost I will pay again, because the alternative, closing myself against everyone out of fear of being used, is a price I refuse to accept. I had been used. I had also loved genuinely and without calculation. For 7 years, both things were true simultaneously. I did not need to collapse them into a single story. The settlement was reached 4 weeks later. Brooke agreed to repay the investors through a structured payment plan. The amounts were real and binding and attached to consequences if she defaulted. Ryan signed a separate repayment agreement with Naomi's office for the money I had lent over 4 years. Not all of it, not immediately, but a formal legal acknowledgement that the debt existed and a commitment to monthly payments starting the following month. The first check arrived on the 3rd of the month. It was modest, it was real, it was accompanied by a card, no message inside. Just Ryan's handwriting at the bottom. Thank you for not giving up on what's true. I read that line 3 times. Then I put the check in my account and the card in the locked drawer with the notebook, because both of them were part of the record now, part of what had actually happened. And what had actually happened was this: I had been wronged, thoroughly and over a long period of time, by people I loved. I had protected myself methodically and without cruelty. I had not pursued maximum damage when I could have. I had left a door open that I had every right to close permanently. And I had kept painting, kept going to the Historical Society, kept having dinner with Dorothea, kept walking through my own house with my own coffee and my own time. I had kept living. That was not a small thing. That, in fact, was everything. The second chapter initiative began the way most real things begin, not with a grand announcement, but with a conversation at a kitchen table. It was a Sunday afternoon in late October. About 8 months after the Tuesday I'd stood in Ryan and Brooke's empty rental house with a casserole going cold in my hands. Dorothea was at my table with her second cup of coffee, and I was telling her about a woman I'd met at the Historical Society, a 71-year-old widow named Constance Hale, different from the Constance in my painting class, who had recently discovered that her adult stepson had quietly transferred her late husband's brokerage account into a joint account she hadn't authorized. Constance had come to the Historical Society because she needed somewhere to be while she figured out what to do, and because she was the kind of woman who processed shock through productivity. I recognized that impulse completely. She doesn't know where to start, I told Dorothea. She's not sure what's legal, what's reversible, what she should document. She's embarrassed. She keeps saying she should have known better. Dorothea looked at me over her coffee mug. She sounds like someone else I know. That's exactly why it matters. I set my cup down. How many women like Constance are out there right now, in this city alone, sitting with something they don't know how to name, too embarrassed to get help, too loyal to the family member who did it to push back? Dorothea was quiet for a moment. What are you thinking, Helen? I'm thinking about Naomi, I said, and about Patricia Delgado, and about everything I learned in the past 8 months that I didn't know before that I should have known, that women like Constance should know before they need it. Dorothea put her cup down. You want to build something? I want to build something, I said. I called Naomi the next morning, a community financial education program, I told her. Free workshops focused on older adults, widows especially, but not exclusively. Covering the specific things nobody teaches you until you're already in trouble: how to recognize forged authorizations, how to understand a power of attorney, how to identify when inheritance manipulation is happening, how to document financial support so it doesn't become invisible. Naomi was silent for a moment. Helen, I know it's ambitious. No, that's not Helen. I've been thinking about something like this for 3 years. I just didn't have the right anchor for it. A pause. I want in officially. I'll teach the legal literacy sessions pro bono. I was going to ask you to. I know you were. A brief pause. Patricia Delgado is going to want in too. I know that also. Who else are you thinking? I want someone from the county deed office. Someone who can talk about property records, how to read them, what to look for. I spent 30 years in that office. I know exactly what that kind of knowledge is worth to a person standing at the wrong end of a financial decision. Do you have someone in mind? I have 3 people in mind, I said. I'll make calls this week. We named the program the Second Chapter Initiative. The name came to me at 2 a.m, the way the right words often do, emerging fully formed from some quiet work that the brain does without your supervision. Second chapter, not because the first chapter was a failure, but because chapters end, and what comes next can be the best part of the book if you have the tools to write it. Naomi filed the nonprofit paperwork in November. Patricia signed on within 48 hours of being asked. A retired county assessor named Douglas Whitman, who had worked 3 desks down from me for 12 years, agreed to lead the property records session. A social worker named Yvonne Carter, who specialized in elder financial abuse for a regional advocacy organization, brought her network and her expertise and a ferocious attention to the specific vulnerability of women who had been conditioned to interpret their own exploitation as love. We scheduled the first workshop for a Saturday in January in the meeting room of the Roanoke Public Library. 12 seats, 31 people registered. I stood at the front of that room on a cold Saturday morning and looked at the faces filling the chairs and the standing space along the wall and the doorway where 4 more people had gathered rather than miss a single word, and I felt something move through me that I hadn't felt in a very long time. Not triumph. This was not about triumph. It was something quieter and more durable. The feeling of being in exactly the right place, doing exactly the right thing, for reasons that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval. My name is Helen Whitaker, I said. 18 months ago, I discovered that my daughter-in-law had been building a business plan around my estate for 7 years. She used a digital copy of my signature on a loan application. She told private investors that my money was coming to them. She listed my house as a contingency asset in a mortgage agreement I had never seen. The room was completely still. I'm not telling you this because I want your sympathy. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that what happened to me was not unusual. It was not a freak occurrence. It is happening right now to people in this room and to people who should be in this room but are too ashamed to come. I paused. And it is preventable, not always, not perfectly, but more often than it happens if people know what to look for. Constance Hale was sitting in the third row. She had brought a notepad. She was already writing. That image, Constance with her notepad, arriving prepared, refusing to be defeated by what had been done to her, stayed with me for weeks after. The workshop ran 4 hours. It was supposed to run 2. Nobody left by the time we packed up. I had a waitlist for the next session. Yvonne had collected 6 intake forms from women who wanted individual consultations. Naomi had given out her card 14 times. Douglas had drawn 2 women into a detailed conversation about a property transfer. One of them was being pressured to make by a nephew she wasn't sure she trusted anymore. I drove home that evening and sat at Paul's desk, and I cried for the first time in months. Not from grief and not from relief exactly, from something that had the texture of both but was neither. From the recognition that the worst thing that had ever happened to me in my financial life had also, improbably, become the most useful thing I had ever done. That the $96,000 in 4 years of exploitation had given me something I could not have built any other way. Standing the authority of a woman who had been through it and come out the other side with her house, her mind and her dignity intact, I sat at Paul's desk and I thought, this is what you do with the worst parts. You don't bury them and you don't perform them. You turn them into something that protects the next person. Ryan called that evening. He had seen something about the workshop on the library's community calendar. I hadn't told him about it, not because I was hiding it, but because it belonged to me in a way I wanted to protect until it was real. Mom, you started a nonprofit. We had our first workshop today. A pause. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to do it first and tell you after. Not ask permission, not manage your reaction, just do it. And then it exists, and then I can share it. I paused. That probably sounds harder than I mean it. No, he said quietly. No, I understand. Another pause. Can I ask what the workshop covered? I told him. All of it: the signature recognition, the power of attorney specifics, the property record literacy, the psychological profile of financial exploitation in family contexts. I told him about Yvonne's framework for understanding why victims so often feel shame rather than anger. I told him about Constance in the third row with her notepad. He was quiet through most of it. When I finished, he said, the psychological profile part, the section about why it happens in families. Did you cover why the family members do it? Yvonne spent 40 minutes on that. What did she say? I thought about how to answer that. She said that most family members who exploit elderly parents don't begin with criminal intent. They begin with entitlement, a gradual, self-reinforcing belief that because they are family, what belongs to the parent will eventually belong to them anyway. And that the step from that belief to exploitation is shorter than most people think, and often invisible to the person taking it. A very long silence. Ryan, I said, are you all right? I'm sitting here thinking about when I stopped seeing your money as your money. His voice was careful and low. I can actually identify the moment. It was about 3 years in. Brooke and I had a conversation about what our lives would look like in 10 years, and she laid out this plan, and somewhere in the middle of it she said, your house would probably be in a trust for us by then. And I didn't correct her. I just let it sit there. And every day I didn't correct it, it became more true in my head. I let that sit for a moment. That's the most honest thing you've said to me in years, I said. Maybe ever. It doesn't make it better. No, but it makes it real. And real is the only place we can build anything from. I paused. Ryan, I need to ask you something, and I need a real answer, not a careful one. Okay. Are you happy? In your life right now, separate from me? Separate from the situation with Brooke, are you happy? The pause was long enough that it answered part of the question. I'm not unhappy, he said. I'm more myself than I've been in a long time. The job is regular and it's not exciting, but it's solid and I'm good at it. I'm sleeping, I'm reading again. I went for a run last week, which I haven't done in 2 years. A pause. Brooke and we're not fighting the way we used to, because most of what we used to fight about was the business and the money, and those things are gone now. Whether that's the same as being happy, I don't know yet. That's his honest answer. You asked for one, I did. I paused. Ryan, whatever happens with your marriage, that is between you and Brooke, and I'm not going to offer an opinion unless you ask for one. But I want you to know that your happiness matters to me. Not your financial situation, not your address, not what you achieve. He took a slow breath. I know that, he said. I know that now. We talked for another 20 minutes about nothing particular: the job, a book he was reading, a restaurant in Charlottesville he'd tried the previous week. Small, ordinary things. The building blocks of the relationship we had never quite built, because we had always been too busy managing crises to have conversations that didn't require something from one of us. After I hung up, I sat for a while and thought about what Yvonne had said in the workshop about the psychology of exploitation, that it begins with entitlement, with the gradual forgetting that someone else is a person and not a resource. I thought about what Ryan had said the moment he stopped seeing my money as my money. The exact identifiable moment when a line was crossed so quietly that neither of them registered the crossing. I thought the tragedy is not that people are evil. The tragedy is that they stop paying attention. They stop looking at the person in front of them and start looking at what that person represents. I had been representing something for years: security, inheritance, a guaranteed safety net, and in that representation, I had stopped being visible as myself, as Helen, as Paul's wife, as a woman with a will and a locked drawer and a spiral notebook and 30 years of expertise and a half-finished painting of a ridgeline in September. I had reclaimed that visibility. That was what the previous 18 months had actually been about. Underneath all the legal filings and canceled payments and new estate plans. Not revenge, not justice, exactly visibility, the refusal to be reduced to a function. The second chapter initiative grew faster than I had planned for. By March, we were running 2 workshops a month. Yvonne brought in a financial advisor who specialized in elder financial planning. Naomi added a session on healthcare proxies and how they could be misused. Patricia Delgado, who had evaluated my competency 8 months earlier, became a regular guest speaker on cognitive documentation, how to establish and maintain a formal record of one's mental capacity, not because you're afraid of losing it, but because having that record makes exploitation much harder to attempt. The library gave us a permanent time slot. A local community foundation offered a small grant. A reporter from the Roanoke Times attended one of our sessions and wrote a piece that ran on a Sunday morning. My phone rang that Sunday with a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Whitaker, my name is Patricia Swan. I'm in Salem. I just read the article about your program in the Times." A pause. "I think what's happening to me I think I might need help." "Tell me what's happening," I said. She told me. It took 20 minutes and she cried twice and apologized both times for crying, and I told her both times that she had nothing to apologize for. By the end of the call, I had connected her with Naomi's office and with Yvonne's advocacy organization, and I had taken down her name and number and promised to follow up personally within the week. After we hung up, I sat for a moment with the phone in my hand. This is what it's for, I thought. This exact phone call, this exact woman, this exact moment of someone deciding not to be alone with it anymore. This is what the Tuesday with the casserole built. The program's first anniversary dinner was held on a Friday evening in April at the private room of a restaurant downtown that a board member donated for the occasion. About 40 people came: program participants, volunteer instructors, community partners, a handful of the women who had come to us in the early months and had since resolved their situations and wanted to give back. Dorothea sat across from me and looked like she was fighting back something that would embarrass her if it surfaced publicly, which meant she was proud and didn't want to make it sentimental. "Don't cry," I told her. "I'm not," she said, absolutely crying. "You're impossible. You built something real, Helen." "Let me feel that for a minute." Ryan came. I had not expected him to. Exactly, I had invited him without real expectation, the way you invite someone to something you genuinely want them to attend, but have stopped requiring their attendance at. He came alone. He arrived on time, which meant he had planned it. He wore a jacket and he looked tired in a way that was different from the exhausted. Strung out tired of the previous year, this was the settled tired of someone doing steady work and not sleeping enough but managing. He found me near the end of the room and he didn't say anything for a moment. He just looked around at the people in the room and the quiet, purposeful energy of a gathering that was celebrating something real. "You did this," he said. "We did this," I said. "Naomi, Patricia, Yvonne, Douglas, 40 people who showed up to the first workshop when we only had chairs for 12. But you started it." "Yes," I said. "I started it." He nodded once slowly. "Can I say something?" "Of course, I understand now why you changed the will," he said it quietly, looking at the room rather than at me. "Not just why you had to, why it was right, why giving money to people who protect elderly women from financial exploitation it's what that money should do. It's what you'd want that money to do." A pause. "I'm not asking you to reconsider. I want you to know I'm not asking that. I know you're not. I'm saying I understand it." And I think he stopped. I think Dad would too. I looked at my son for a moment. At the way he was standing, quieter than he used to stand, less performed, less full of the restless confidence that had always been more Brooke's than his. He looked smaller in some way that was actually larger, more like himself. "He would," I said. "He absolutely would." We stood together for a while after that, watching the room. Constance Hale was talking to a woman I didn't know, leaning forward with the particular energy of someone sharing something important. Yvonne was at the center of a small group, making a point with her hands the way she always did when she was explaining something she cared about. Naomi was at the bar looking like she was simultaneously relaxing and taking mental notes, because that was simply how Naomi existed in the world. Arthur, my Arthur from the watercolor class, the one who had painted the slightly crooked Kentucky barn, had come as Dorothea's guest. He was 81 now, more slowly moving than he'd been at class, but present with the full-body presence of someone who had decided to be exactly where they were. He had brought me a small wrapped package, which he pressed into my hands when we greeted each other, with the solemnity of someone presenting something they had been saving. Inside was the barn painting, signed on the back in his careful hand, To Helen, who taught me that crooked is still true. I held it for a moment. Arthur, I said. Don't make a fuss, he said. Just hang it somewhere, you'll see it, I will. Near a window. It needs light, near a window, I agreed. I hung it the next morning, on the wall in Paul's study, where the afternoon light came through at the right angle to catch the slightly uncertain perspective and the genuine, unmistakable affection of the hand that had made it. I stood back and looked at it for a long time. The months since the anniversary dinner have settled into a rhythm that I have learned to trust. Ryan sends a check on the 3rd of every month. He calls on Sundays, usually in the early afternoon. The conversations are longer than they used to be, and less careful, less managed, and there are moments in them that feel like the conversations we should have been having all along, if we'd had the kind of relationship where honesty was the default rather than the exception. Brooke never called, not once, not an email, not a card, not a message through Ryan. I made my peace with that earlier than I expected to, because the energy I had spent for years trying to be something acceptable to Brooke, trying to angle myself into the right shape to earn a warmth she had decided not to give, was energy I had not understood the cost of until it was returned to me. Getting it back felt like setting down something heavy that I had stopped noticing the weight of. The civil claim against Hearth and Haven concluded in May. Brooke paid the first installment of the settlement. The investors will recover most of what they lost over the next 3 years. It is not perfect justice, there is no such thing, but it is accountability, documented and binding, which is the closest the law can get to justice, and often the most useful form of it. Naomi called to tell me when the first payment cleared. It's done, she said. The legal chapter anyway. Thank you, I said. For all of it, for every single piece of it, Helen. A pause. Thank you for fighting it correctly. A lot of people in your position don't. They either give in or they go scorched earth, and you did neither. You did the hard thing, which was being exactly as firm as the situation required and exactly as generous as your conscience allowed. I thought about that for a while after we hung up. Exactly as firm as required and exactly as generous as conscience allowed. I turned that over in my mind like a stone in water, feeling its shape. I think that is what love looks like when it stops being naive. Not soft or firmer, actually, because it has to hold more weight. But not cruel, never cruel. Love that knows its own boundaries is not smaller than love without them. It is more real, more durable, more true. I am 69 years old now. My house on Clover Ridge Road is peaceful in a way it hasn't been since Paul was alive. My calendar has my name on it, my locked drawer holds a notebook, a completed estate plan, a card in Ryan's handwriting, and a growing file of documentation from second chapter participants whose situations we've helped resolve. My easel holds a new painting, the ridgeline at Douthat in September. The color's finally right. The distance finally rendered the way memory actually holds it, which is warmer and more golden and more specifically love than any photograph could be. I painted it for Paul. I will hang it in the hallway beside the dogwood tree painting I never framed. 2 windows looking out at things I loved, both of them finally where they belong. The last time Ryan visited, he sat in the kitchen drinking coffee while I finished a phone intake call with a woman in Bedford County who had discovered her son was listing her home as collateral on a business loan. I walked her through exactly what to do. I told her the order of things. Attorney first, documentation second, financial accounts third. I told her to write everything down. I told her the truth does not require her to be cruel, but it does require her to be clear. When I hung up, Ryan was looking at me from across the table. How many people have you helped? He asked. I stopped counting at 100. He was quiet for a moment. That woman, the one on the phone, her son is doing what I did. Yes, and you help her anyway. That is the point, I said. That is the whole point. He nodded slowly. He looked down at his coffee. He looked up. Mom, I know you don't owe me this, and I know an apology doesn't balance what I cost you. But I need to say it clearly, the way I should have said it a long time ago. He met my eyes. I am sorry for all of it, for every year I let convenience matter more than you did. For every time I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. For treating your love like a resource and your life like a schedule I could manage. His voice was steady and low and entirely without performance. I am sorry. I looked at my son across the kitchen table. At the face I had known since before he could speak, that I had watched change through every version of itself over 40 years, that I had held between my hands in a hospital room the day he was born, while Paul stood beside me, shaking with the specific joy of something too large to contain. I thought about all the things forgiveness is not. It is not forgetting. It is not restored trust, which has to be rebuilt slowly and cannot be rushed or faked. It is not the erasure of what happened or the revision of what it cost. Forgiveness is the decision to stop letting the wound be the most important thing in the room. I know you are, I said, and I forgive you, not because everything is fixed, it isn't. Not because you've earned it back, that takes longer. But because you're my son and I love you, and carrying that weight does neither of us any good. He exhaled slowly. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, I said. Just keep showing up. That's all forgiveness ever asks. He stayed for lunch. We talked about his job, about a trail he'd hiked the previous weekend, about a book he thought I'd like. He washed his own cup before he left. He hugged me at the door, a real hug, the kind that doesn't end before it should, and then he was gone, down the front walk and into his car and down Clover Ridge Road. I stood at the window and watched him go. Then I turned back to my house, my kitchen with the blue canisters and the crooked drawer, Paul's desk in the study with Arthur's barn on the wall above it, the easel in the corner with the September ridgeline taking shape in gold and blue, the locked drawer with its honest record of what had happened and what I had done about it. I thought about Brooke standing in her new kitchen 90 miles away on a Tuesday morning, answering my call with a smirk in her voice. I suppose we forgot to tell you. She had believed that forgetting me was the beginning of their freedom. She had not understood what I knew, in the quiet of a house I had built a life inside, that a woman who has spent 30 years reading property records and raising a child and loving a husband and weathering grief and keeping a spiral notebook in a locked drawer is not someone you forget. She is someone who remembers everything and who decides, with full clarity and open eyes, exactly what to do with what she knows. That is not weakness dressed up as patience. That is a woman who knows precisely where she stands and has chosen deliberately and without apology to stand there.